Okay, welcome everybody. I'm very thrilled that we've got so many people participating at this time of day. For some, it's in the afternoon. For some, it's very, very early in the morning. And for some, it's the European time. My name is Mariet Verhoef-Cohen. I am the president of Women for Water Partnership, and I feel honored to welcome you all to our session for the Stockholm World Water Week. And today's session is a follow-up to the webinar series of 8 case studies, of which there were 2 in India, 2 in Sri Lanka, and 1 each in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand. These 8 case studies were followed by a 2-day virtual conference held in October and November of last year. The same theme was for these webinars, and it was Women, Water, Climate, Tackling the Challenges. This theme highlighted the catalytic role played by women in the use and management of water, which led to substantial improvement in the lives, the livelihoods, and overall well-being of their communities. Their experiences confirm that women not only have the capacity to contribute to solutions on water security issues, but that they are an essential component if these solutions are to be equitable and sustainable in the long run. The outcome of the case studies and conference were substantially published in a document entitled The Way Forward, which can be found in the files of our Equitable World Water website program site. The Way Forward has been an empowering process, a process where we acquired new knowledge and skills and ultimately could influence the attitudes, decision-making and actions of the women and the participants. It made us think of effective strategies, realizing that water and food security are inextricably linked with climate resilience and are critical to build post-COVID communities. Women need to help build societies better equipped to climate change adaptation and resilience. Our way forward is a living and ongoing activity, but more can be found on the on womenforwater.org website. And because it's ongoing, this is why we have this session. So today's session, we have, to start with, we have a wonderful keynote speaker, and each panelist, after when the panel starts, will elaborate on a question, after which we hope to have a very, very interactive discussions with all of you participants. But first and foremost, I have the great honor to announce our keynote speaker, Dr. Uschi Eid. Uschi Eid served 10 years on the United Nations Secretary General's Advisory Board on Water and Sanitation, better known as UNSCAP. As vice chair and chair, and as at the present, she is the honorary professor at the University of Applied Science of Osnabrück, teaches at the Free University in Berlin, and serves as president of the German Africa Foundation. Uschi, you're very welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mariet, and thank you for inviting me. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, in 2017, the Women for Water Partnership invited me to a similar seminar, and by preparing my speech then, I went through all major water-related documents, decisions, conference outcomes to see whether I would find really good progress when it comes to gender equality. I did the same now, hoping that 5 years later, things would be better. But what I found was more than disappointing. I must recall In 1992, the so-called Dublin Principle number 3 told the world, and I quote, "Women play a central part in the provision, management, and safeguarding of water." There was an implicit appeal to governments to design accordingly their policy strategies, enact laws, rules, and regulations so that all levels can profit from women's knowledge, dedication, and water wisdom. The appeal also addressed the private sector to offer the necessary training and job opportunities. The MDGs, the human rights to water and sanitation, the Agenda 2030 with SDG 5 and 6 followed. And what is the result of all this? Gender inequalities in the use and management of water and sanitation are still there and almost everywhere, and I cannot see real progress. Although the central role of women in the provision, management, and safeguarding of water has been recognized and is well documented, reliable data on progress made in achieving gender equality are scarce and fragmented. It proves that it was a mistake, that SDG 6 would not require sex disaggregated data. It is commendable that finally now in 2021, the Integrated Monetary Initiative started working on it. Let me quote a few UN figures that show the inequalities and the special fragility of women and girls. 1 million deaths each year are associated with unclean births. More than 70% of the rural poor are women, and most of them dependent on agriculture as their primary source of income. So they suffer under weather extremes more severely than men. Fewer than 50 countries, compared to over 190 UN member states, have laws or policies that specifically mention women's participation for rural sanitation or water resource management. But statistics do not tell us the struggle, the pain, the humiliation and shame women go through when there are no gender-separated lockable toilets at schools, at work, or marketplaces, or bus stations. When girls and women have to be aware of dangerous animals when they go out during the night to relieve themselves. When women who have to deal with water and hygiene problems in their housework and who know the solutions by practical experience are not part and parcel of the planning and decision-making processes. When politicians make promises after disasters like floods and droughts to help the affected communities, but nothing is being done. When international cooperation is emphasizing the importance of women and girls' empowerment, but the money meant for such programs is divided to more urgent activities, whatever that are, let alone that money is ending up in corruption channels. When during the corona pandemic, children are taught to wash their hands regularly, but there is not enough and not steadily water available. And policymakers do not even recognize the importance of water and hygiene to combat the pandemic. Why is the ignorance, the carelessness, the indifference towards these challenges so grave? Challenges which are obvious, out in the daylight, and not difficult to identify and to grasp. As a former member of government, I ask my colleagues, are they too distant from the daily problems the normal citizens has to cope with facing growing water risks? Are politicians insulated in the capitals, not recognizing and caring of practical challenges on household and community level? Is the focus of training and empowerment more on bureaucrats than on women in rural areas, in agriculture, in community organizations, in local governments? Wherever women play a role, they mostly took their water destiny in their own hand, and I really salute them for that. Be it the late Wangari Maathai, Peace Nobel laureate, and her Green Belt movement to rescue the last forests as water towers in Nairobi, be it the so-called guerrilla greywater girls in California, who initiated the Greywater Action for Sustainable Water Culture, or be it the water-wise women plumbers in Jordan to reduce water losses through dripping taps, loose flush, or toilets or rotten pipes, just to mention three very different examples. Having to face more and more water challenges through erratic weather conditions all over the globe, the following immediate steps are on the local level a matter of urgency: to train community members and especially women everywhere to prepare for disasters, to integrate water-related risks and behavior change in the curricula, to force the community representatives and city councils to integrate water risks in community planning and having women in the planning process, and to ensure sufficient resources and finances reach the women themselves. Now let me jump from the local to the global level. With regard to SDG 6, also most of the SDG 6 targets do not mention women and girls. They must be relevant actors in the management of water resources, referring to target 6.5. In the protection and restoration of water-related ecosystems, target 6.6. And in local community activities for improving water and sanitation management, target 6.b. As a member of the former advisory board on water and sanitation of the UN Secretary General, known as UNSCAP, I ask myself, is water, after Kofi Annan, still a top priority within the UN? Why is the latest UN list of women politicians in water and environment from 2006 not updated? Why do we still see too often traditional pictures with girls carrying buckets of water and not female water engineers on UN information leaflets? Why is the implementation of all the water and sanitation related decisions so slow, despite the water action decade that is running now for 3 years already? Did the SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework deliver, since promising, and I quote, inclusivity and unleashing female and youth potential? At a meeting of former UNSCAP members this February, we came to the following conclusions. First, although the SDGs allowed all major related water challenges to be addressed in a holistic manner, there is lack of corresponding UN water architecture. Second, since 2015, UN member states met only once for 3 hours in July 2018 to discuss specifically the contents of their actions on SDG 6. Many of us around this online table were there, and I do remember that the results of the review on the role of women in the implementation of SDG 6 was devastating. Many countries, including my own, did not even mention it in their national voluntary report. The intergovernmental work on water is still scattered between subsectoral thematic meetings or non-UN meetings. Fourth, UN member states have never discussed potential action to accelerate progress towards water-related global targets. Even in the 2019 SDG summit, where they decided to accelerate action on SDGs, they focused only on the progress on access to safe drinking water, despite SDG 6 being a multifaceted goal. Based on these unsatisfactory findings, I make 4 recommendations to this audience today. First, that the 2023 UN Water Conference decides to establish a UN Intergovernmental Committee on Water and Sanitation that enables countries to discuss all freshwater and sanitation challenges regularly, to review progress towards water-related SDG 6 targets, and to guide UN actions on these matters. Second, such UN intergovernmental work needs to be informed by an independent UN Scientific and Practice Panel on Water and Sanitation, an IPCC similar setup, mandated to gather global evidence on major water challenges. Women scientists and women practitioners with local and institutional knowledge have to be part and parcel of this endeavor. Third, the successful experience of UNSCAP and of the high-level water panel have shown the importance of an independent voice that is able to advise governments and the UN system. Such an independent voice with women as important members should be set up by the UN Secretary General as soon as possible. And fourthly, water management and the inbuilt role of women are key success factors of many SDGs. Therefore, it is required that all UN work and UN conferences dedicated to specific SDGs include systematically a component on water and gender. This should be the case of UN conferences on climate, on food, on energy, on biodiversity, on growth, on poverty, and cities and the like. Well, I wish this meeting interesting discussions and that the outcome is being heard and followed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ushi. This was very loud and clear. As always, we know that you are very good at explaining exactly what is needed. And we are totally in agreement. So we hope that there will be a good discussion afterwards with all the participants later. Thank you very much. And I quickly will go to our 2-minute video. So, okay. So this all came out of the different webinars that we had, and in a way it addresses all the issues that Ushi has already mentioned. Also the financial issues that women are not supported, which was already found out by the OECD in 2017, that it was only 0.05%. So I think that it would be very interesting to listen to our panel at the moment. And so what I would like to do is to start introducing the panel one by one. And I would like to start with Mr. Carlo Galli. Carlo Galli is a technical manager, water resources at Nestlé, and Carlo Galli is key actor in transforming and redefining the water stewardship strategy and program at Nestlé. He inspires and guides Nestlé's management at corporation and market level in its implementation. Thank you, Carlo, for joining us. And I would like to break the following question to you, or actually two little questions. What are the issues and responses possible for food and beverage companies? And secondly, what tools and policies do you have in place that are usable to engage with local communities? Carlo, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for having me with you today. I hope you can hear me well, right?
Excellent, Carlo, go ahead.
Fantastic. Okay, so I think probably my role here is to give set the scene from a food and beverage company, but probably looking at the overall demand and supply gap we have in various watersheds and the way we try to address it. I think it's clear that we have an issue global, but also locally. Most of the watersheds are related to demand and supply. Some of the drivers are related to absolute increase in water use, which is basically population increase or diet and habit change, but most of the issue, I think personally, is related to inefficiency in the way we manage water for the different uses. And when I look at the issue of access to water, I normally try to look at it on two levels. The first is very broad, is an overall issue, access to water for all possible use, which is basically people, nature, industry, agriculture. But clearly we need to look with a specific and more careful attention when it's about the issue of wash, so access to water for communities, the water that is needed for living and thriving. So if I am looking at these two levels and I try to look at how we can address that into our water stewardship strategy, we have also within our own footprint, two different layers. One is operations, direct operations, factories, manufacturing facilities, and one is probably where we have lying the biggest water footprint is the agricultural supply chain, which we don't own, but we feel we have an indirect responsibility. So if we try to combine all this, access to water and operations versus supply chain, I can quickly give you a picture of what we do. Factories, as you probably know, for decades we've been working on improving water use efficiency. This is obviously decreasing dependency on local water needs, but it's not giving us resilience for us and resilience for other users. And this is why we have introduced over time a much broader water stewardship approach, which is pushing us to link more in a collaborative mode with local stakeholders. When it's about wash, for an operation standpoint, probably some of you know that we have been historically leading the WASH pledge, launched many years ago by the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We have been probably the first company to implement it in all our operations, because sometimes it seems very straightforward that all employees have access to adequate standards of drinking water and sanitation, but in fact, this is not always the case. So I think it's very important to speak WASH starting from your own people, your own operations. Then when it's agriculture, we have a strong sustainable agriculture initiative. We are moving into so-called regenerative agriculture strategy, which is probably moving forward in the agenda, not only to compensate for the impacts, but to restore, also renew. So having new ways to be responsible and water steward.
Hello, I have to. Your 3 minutes are almost gone, so can you maybe finish it? Yes.
Well, as I'm trying to say, agriculture is the biggest part of the supply chain. So there we have an efficiency piece in improving the way we use water with our thousands of farmers, but also there's a wash component in agriculture because with climate change, water is becoming scarce for the crop production, but obviously water is also becoming scarce for people living in those areas. So we are working on human right to water and sanitation guidelines, which are our standards, our policies, and we have also suppliers code and third-party audits. This is overall. I understand that this is 3 minutes. I'm not sure if in the next in the remaining parts of the hours you will also have the chance to give me the chance to answer the second part of the question, which is more about the tools.
I'm sure we will have questions. Thank you very much. And Lesha already put the water steward standard in the chat, so people can download that and maybe have a quick look and come back with questions during the question and answer. Thank you very much. And I would like to continue quickly with Simi Kamal. She's the founder and chairman of HISA Foundation, and Simi is on the board of the International Water Management Institute, IMWI, based in Sri Lanka. She served for 9 years on the technical committee of the Global Water Partnership, based in Sweden, and Simi Kamal has 40 years of experience in water sectors, environment, climate change, women's empowerment, social development, grant management, and the poverty alleviation. So Simi, I would like to ask you a question as well, and that is, what are the challenges faced by the civil society in South Asia to get funding for new and or upscaling water management projects? Simi, you've got 3 minutes to answer, and we will be happy to have a discussion afterwards.
Thank you very much, Marriott, and very nice to see so many old and new friends. Let me begin by saying that globally, and certainly in South Asia, it was the women's organizations that traditionally worked on issues that were impacted the result of climate change, working on conservation, working on water conservation. If we look at the old movements, they were all fueled by women, whether it was women in Japan that saved Lake Biwa from the massive contamination after a 10-year battle. And the concept of water stewardship comes from there, from Lake Biwa. Then the Chipko movement in Assam to save all those trees that were being cut. The women's groups across South Asia. My friend Kusum is also really active with women's groups in Sri Lanka. Women in water networks across several South Asian countries. And also if we look at what is happening in Malaysia and Thailand and Indonesia, we have so many examples where women have remained close to nature in spite of industrializations and how they have worked on conservation. Given the feminization of poverty, women have focused on this. They have remained close to human rights. They have worked with marginalized communities, and they really understand what is happening right now with climate change, because women don't do the sexy male work of coming out with guns and frightening people with that, but doing the daily work of protecting children and women. I've borrowed that from my friend Gabriel, who writes a lot on Twitter. And you can find her at Design Mom, and you will see some wonderful expositions of what is happening. Now, given this scenario, one would have expected that whatever funding is available through government and through donors and through multinational fora, indeed even through some corporates, that women's organizations would benefit from those, and their programs would grow, and they would be strengthening, and there would be a lot of expansion. But what we are seeing, or what certainly I'm seeing in this region, is quite the opposite. Because of very many international sanctions that many of our countries face, either directly or indirectly, including what is called FATF, trying, financing and finding out, putting a stop to terror financing. Now, with that have come all kinds of new terminology that we have become used to. One is called KYC, know your customer, which means that under these rules and regulations, you have to be able to report that every single person that you go down to benefit is either not a terrorist or is not supporting the terrorists, or these little bits of money like $100 or $150 are not supporting some terrorist activities against developed world. This has really made it very, very difficult, because a lot of the monitoring now has to do with the financial monitoring. So when, cash-strapped organizations have to put out teams to go and monitor their work, a lot of it is spent on the documentation that FATF requires, to the detriment of actually watching and looking after programs and looking after people and looking after, improving their lot. It's all about ensuring compliance and the financial compliance. From my own experience,
can you finish your?
Yes, of course I will. Yeah. So my last point, which is very important to understand, is now that many of these funds are under so much scrutiny, a lot of them are being diverted to government organizations or to very big organizations, or indeed to some corporates, that have opened their own development sectors, because they have the accountants and other people on hand to do the FATF. But what that has meant is money is now going to groups that are run by men. There's a lot of hijacking by government and by these larger accountancy or accountants related based organizations, which in water, in climate change, in energy, food, and also in biodiversity. So that is something I wanted to place, and we'll talk about some more later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, we would love to have some questions to Simi, because you're so on the ground and so active and know what is happening. So we will try and come back to you later. But first of all, I would like to continue with Kei. Kei is a Japanese national and an independent young water professional and consultant based in Berlin. And she focuses on water governance, climate and sustainability in Asia and beyond. So Kei, what I would like to ask you as a young water professional and consultant is, so what can other countries, learn from Asia's risk management system that are in place and involve civil society from different generations? Kei, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Thank you, Mariette, for the introduction.
Yeah. One second. Bram, our host, has been thrown out of the meeting. I don't know why, but is there a chance that you can answer the question live?
Yes.
Okay, thank
absolutely.
You.
So I have 2 points for the question you asked me. And my first point is about the strengthening community-based approach, including local governments. And my second point is that the relational issues and organizational culture matter a lot for better water governance. And for the first part, I would like to mention about some case from Japan. So for risk management involving civil societies. So in case of Japan, so there are many community-led initiatives for raising awareness for risk management and training for evacuation, mainly led by local governments or schools or employers. And especially local governments play an important role for risk management, I must say. And many governments have developed their own handbooks and disaster prevention apps with hazard maps. And when it comes to gender perspectives, according to surveys, so the majority of local governments have responded that they take gender aspects seriously when making handbooks on disaster risks that are community-oriented. And some local governments have published handbooks on disaster management just for women. And I would like to argue that the education on natural disaster in Japan for women and children are very deeply rooted in the Japanese society and culture, because we are so prone to natural disasters. But since many initiatives are community-led, based, whether you can access to information depends on which community you belong to. So therefore, access to information, for example, for elderly or disabled or minorities can be limited. And therefore, gender dimensions are also limited to raising awareness in disaster prevention only. And additionally, I would like to stress that there are large gender gaps for post-disaster period, and also at the policy-making level, using the case of Japan. And as you know, impacts of climate change and water-related disaster on men and women are so different. This is very obvious when it comes to providing relief or recovery or support for victims, because women's needs are often overlooked in the post-disaster period. And my second point is relational aspects and organizational culture matter for water governance in Asia. So water-related challenges are often described as governance crisis, but in Asia, so relationships or connections, personal connections are very important, not just for business, but governments that are responsible for providing water and sanitation services. And I found out through my fieldwork experience and also from my professional experience that in addition to improving governance coordination or governance systems itself, developing strong organizational culture within water sector organization is very critical in improving water sector performance and also good governance, and including mitigating corruption that can be identified as clientelism, patronage, or it can be also briberies or abuse, or gender-based violence for receiving public goods and services. And in some contexts in Asia, there's also mutual understanding between public officials and citizens, and corrupt practices are therefore accepted. So we have to investigate more gendered impacts caused by lack of good governance and how organizational culture helps this to combat this. So, and in conclusion, I want to emphasize 2 points that I mentioned today. So risk management should be driven by local actors such as local governments, schools and companies involving women's perspectives. And we should also look into more relational organizational aspect for improving governance systems, considering gender aspects for in-water sector organizations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And sorry, one way or the other, Bram was thrown out and they made Carlo host, so, but he's back in, so don't worry, we'll just leave it as it is. Thank you for your information, and we'll come back with the questions. Then, last but not least, I would like to introduce Amrita. And Amrita is a PhD research scholar at the Technical University of Cologne in Germany, and originally from Kathmandu in Nepal. Amrita is a civil engineer by profession with special focus on hydroinformatics. And her ongoing doctoral research is about water supply and quality monitoring via emerging technologies, and initiated research in Nepal called Drink Pani. Well, I have, of course, a good question for you, Amrita. What do you think can be the role of the youth in building climate disaster risk resilience? And then, even more important, what happens if ICT, electricity, internet fail, or is unaffordable? Is there a plan B? So the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marit. I'd like to start with the general thing that we know. The risk from climate change or climate disasters like floods, storms, wildfires, and weather extremes are becoming visible. Such unavoidable consequences of climate change have questioned our existence, and we cannot deny this truth. Therefore, it is the time to act. Time to act is now. And here comes the question of potential role of youth in building resilience and adaptation strategies. And I have always been saying, we have already seen youth are the leaders of today and tomorrow. In any context, children and youth today are the ones who will be taking the charge of the high-level policy making and implementation in their own communities to global scale ahead. Therefore, we need to start involving them practically in using required tools and technologies like sensors, mobile apps, drones, or the artificial intelligence technologies and more are there since the early age. There are noticeable examples in today's world where youth-led organizations are taking up space in meaningful discussions and contributing to transforming policies and norms. With my own personal example, together with my research team, I have been also conducting doctoral research and have taken initiative during PANI in developing youth-led participatory sensing model, including the supporting roles of women groups in preparing communities for water and climate actions, with case study area in Pokhara, Nepal, where youth are given the technologies where they can go in the field by themselves, can understand the crises, hazards, risks, and can also motivate their communities from their household to school levels effectively. In addition, we at Youth for the Rhine also intends to motivate younger generations across the Rhine Basin in thinking about and addressing one of Europe's major societal issues, so climate adaptation and the diverse issues of water, food, and energy. If we want to bring any real change, there are no shortcuts. We need to work at the grassroots level. Youth can mobilize the community outreach campaigns very effectively, empowering or capacitating youth in activities with the adequate use of information and communication technologies that I have been saying for climate resilience and adaptation from schools or universities programs to community projects is vital. By involving youth in disaster preparedness and recovery efforts, youth serving agencies can help to not only increase youth's awareness of hazards, but can also enhance the chance that they openly discuss how to adequately protect their families and loved ones and understand how to seek help should their community be affected. Youth can play a range of roles in youth preparedness programs and play a crucial role in recovery efforts. They may assist communities in mapping their risk and protective factors, or may hold leadership positions within programs in their communities. And for the second question, what happens if ICT, electricity, and internet fail or is unaffordable, and is there any plan B? This is very important, as we all have been seeing the consequences around us, not only in developing countries, but these days also in developed countries, the recent examples. So some of the additional roles of youth can include sharing messages. As we all know, youth can help the share message of disaster preparedness or emergency stays with their effective communication skills in a very prompt scale, like how to contact people in which level and how to utilize the different channels beyond the ICT's approach, and acting as change makers. Youth can act as change makers by sharing information they learned in youth preparedness programs and helping parents and communities to prepare for disaster. For an example, by developing a disaster plan or disaster preparation kit, by providing the training that is really required, how to act before this kind of disaster and how to act after this kind of disaster, post-disaster phase.
Okay.
And
I think we have to look at you, and I'm sure we will come back to see to discuss this plan B more, how they can do that without internet. We will discuss that later. And now, thank you very much, Amrita. And of course, we would like to know from Aaron. Aaron, first of all, welcome, and we sincerely appreciate your early rise. So Aaron Solzberg is the director of the Water Institute at the University of North Carolina. The goal of the Water Institute is to contribute to a more water secure world through research, policy, and practice. Maybe they also looked at a plan B. And prior to joining the UNC, Aaron served at the Department of State's first Special Coordinator for Water. So Aaron, what you have listened to all the speakers, you have listened to Ushi Eid, And of course, you have also ideas on how to interpret this all and how you see the situation in water and gender at the moment. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Marie, and thank you for inviting me. And I think I'm going to go back to Ushi's comments, in part because many of the speakers mentioned this. I think we certainly recognize the disproportionate impacts that water insecurity has on women, girls, and youth. And we've made a lot of promises, particularly around gender equity and on gender integration. Ushi laid out an entire series of commitments that we've made over the years. But the fact is, it's not getting done, right? And I think we have to have a serious and hard look at ourselves as to why this is the case. Is it too hard? Is it too expensive? Do we lack the data to drive policy reform? Or look, it's just not my problem. Or as Maria suggests, is the empowerment of women and youth, is it actually threatening to some of us? And for those reasons, are we not really engaging in the ways that we need to? I'd argue that it even goes a little bit deeper than that. I think there are systematic biases that are preventing us from fully addressing and integrating the needs of women and girls into the work that we do. And I think we need to take these challenges head on. This, of course, goes well beyond water, right? It's about land tenure, it's about access to finance, and of course, access to basic services. But we're failing in many other ways. Much of the data that we collect, and this came up from a number of our speakers, while disaggregated by gender, isn't really gender directed. In other words, we're not asking the right questions that will allow us to better understand the unique impacts these issues have on women and girls. Kay mentioned the fact that we're not sharing data, which is a lack of transparency in the data that we provide to these groups that are doing work on the ground. And that too can be a huge impediment to action. Ushi pointed out the fact that we're not representing women in other areas of work in the things that we do. Where are the pictures of women engineers? Where are the pictures of women scientists? How are we creating an environment that allows girls to aspire to work in the water sector in ways that we want them to? I also still don't think that we give grants that don't include resources for proper monitoring and evaluation, and that we've gotten past our own internal biases that prevent women and girls from having equal seat at the table. We really don't truly respect at this point experiential learning. And we're continuing to use issues around gender and meritocracy to keep women and girls out of many of the processes that we're involved in. So at the end of the day, I think there are a number of challenges that we need to try to address if we're going to create equal access. And yes, we can bring more attention to that through the UN processes and at the UN level. But at the end of the day, I think we have to change the work that we do on the ground. And this is where I think, I would ask donors to lead. Donors must give money directly to women's groups. They need to put women in leadership positions, both at the project level, but also within institutions and at the institutional level that manage money and funds. We need to include proper data collection and analysis. We need to include metrics and output measures that are specifically addressing the needs of women, and not just that it's 50-50 or that we're disaggregating data collection, but we're really examining the core reasons for some of these systemic differences between women and men and people and youth in the ground. I think Kay mentioned a really interesting point at the very end about building cultures. And at the end of the day, I think this is what it's about, right? We have to have a cultural reform and how we do our work institutionally and on the ground that puts our successes rooted firmly in women and youth and including them in how we do our work on the ground. So that would be my reflection on what I heard.
Thank you very much. That was very clear. And thank you for your reaction, because I think it sort of put it all together. And as we are slowly losing a little bit of time, I would like to sort of announce Lesha. Lesha is the moderator for the questions. She's a founding and steering committee member of Women for Water Partnership, and she's the advocacy lead. Lesha serves as a steering committee member of the European Pact for Water, the Butterfly Effect NGO Coalition, AGWA, and the Climate is Water campaign. Lesha, will take over the lead on the questions and answer session. So Lesja, please, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much, Mariet. And thank you all speakers, panelists, for your contributions so far. I think the first question that I would like to ask is to Amrita, because some of our audience were asking, what is the connection between youth participation and gender? So does it make it more difficult for girls, young women, or doesn't play a role, or how do you look at that?
Thank you, Lisa, for this very important question. According to my experience during this ongoing research program, I've realized that this is a very important role youth actors or this youth-led initiative and this gender gap, or how do we involve young girls or women in these kind of activities, it is quite crucial. At the same time, we've also realized that there are cases of cultural biasness or cultural spaces in its place. So we have to bring these strategies or kind of activities not only in focusing youth-led initiative, but at the same time we have to involve indigenous local women knowledge into practice, and that is what I have been trying to involve in the activities. But having said this, it is quite crucial and it is quite complicated to involve this kind of initiative together. So we also need to understand how not only starting this kind of activities can play a role or for building this kind of resilience and adaptation strategies, but how to involve local governments and local organizations so that it can go for sustainable practice. Because there has been so many activities we can say for one-time practice or one-time activity, but if we cannot take it for longer period involving in the activities of schools or municipalities, we cannot take it for longer time. So it is very important.
I'm going to stop you here, Amrita. Thank you very much. Carlo, I'm going back to you. And I would love you to tell us some of the stuff that you didn't get a chance to say earlier, especially on the tools that you as a company are using to get more inclusive and diverse activities. So can I give you the floor?
Yes, thank you, Lesja. Well, I would probably mention as a tool and a set of principles, what we have adopted boldly is the Alliance for Water Stewardship Standard. Why is that important? I can see here, and I really appreciate the level of detail you try to look into the communities and what the role of women, what the role of young people. I think for a company, for a private sector actor locally, it's important to start looking at the community overall, or stakeholders or neighbors, however you want to call, as a key set of people you need to include in defining your water strategy. For so long, companies have been dealing with their own individual strategies, respecting clearly local rules, but we have understood along the way that we cannot really build resilience in water management locally if we do not engage at the very beginning of the discussion with local stakeholders and neighbors. And the AWS, I really would like that everybody have a look to the standard, is setting, first of all, a common language for water stewardship. Is not only looking at the definition from a social or economic or an environmental standpoint. I think that the real additional piece is in adding the notion of catchment as a size, as a boundary for where we share water with others, and also the stakeholder inclusive process. And for a company, if you adopt these principles, you really can tackle and address two big issues, two big barriers in improving local water management. One is building the knowledge, because while you adopt the standard, you are forced as an individual to build science, to gather data, but then also to share data with your neighbors, to raise awareness and connecting with them, also trying to create the conditions for collective action.
Okay,
so this is in a nutshell.
No, thank you. I have one more question for Simi. Simi, and we got a question on financing smaller organizations. So sometimes the question is about other type of activity that still might be rewarding for women. So, Simi, is there a quick answer you can give to that?
If I've understood correctly, what is being asked is whether smaller organizations have helped women in their programs. Am I right? Is that the question?
Yeah, and
Okay.
how? Even if they don't look like supporting women.
Yeah, what I said was that right now, much of the funding which is available is being hijacked by government or other bigger organizations, because the compliance requirements are so difficult and so complex and complicated that smaller organizations are not able to hire a battery of accountants and to have 10 people to go out in the field all the time. So that has meant that many of the smaller organizations doing work on the ground now really do find it difficult to access the funding. Now, how do we change that? Many of us across all these Asian countries, and particularly in South Asia, are trying to work with government to say that government agencies should be putting out these funds, the smaller funds, because maybe there would be, the government scrutiny through their accounting system would mean that this women could use these funds. And also we are continuously working with the very big, huge donor organizations that have donor funding available, to try to keep educating them that they must find ways to support these smaller organizations, and that the criteria that is applied should be different.
Okay, Simi, I think this is something we need to discuss further, and no doubt we'll come back to you, because Women for Water is specifically looking into this. How can we entice, motivate donors to make funding available to local women's organizations, something that both Ushi and Aaron also called for. So CB is very, very strict. So it's not my choice, but I have to go back to Kusum to close the session for us.
Thank you, Lesha. Thank you, everybody who is listening to this from wherever you are in the world. Let me start off by talking about Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens wrote that we are in the best of times and we are in the worst of times. It is the worst of times for us in Sri Lanka because 8 people are dying every hour from COVID. But it is also the best of times for everybody, because there's nothing like a global disaster to propel us out of the comfort zones, the business as usual mode, and force us to rethink our strategies. Recollecting the overarching challenges that I've encountered in 25 years of coming to Stockholm, going international, regional, and national level work as researcher and activist, there was a time that we struggled to get women to global meetings, but now we have the gold standard. So overall, I remain optimistic. Ushi Aid has given us up-to-date data on support for women. Politicians and international agencies which work on the stratospheric global level seems to have forgotten that the SDGs will only be reached if you involve the 51% of women who are not victims, but who are strong catalysts for change. But they need support to get there. And where is that support? I ask myself, where have we gone as women's organizations, and there are many supporters, that we could not achieve that level of funding to achieve the SDGs. 0.15% against 51% of people in the world.
Kusum, you have 10 seconds. Kusum, you have 10 seconds.
11-minute trip to outer space can cost $28. Sanitation isn't sexy. Space travel for billionaires is. So I think that what we need to do is try and get our activism engaged in working on the field after the pandemic, hopefully, because the SDG battle can only be won if community engagement comes squarely upfront, and the 51% gets a little bit more than 0.05%. Thank you.
Marriott, you're muted.
Thank you, Padma.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And I think we are out of we only had 1 or 2 minutes extra. So it was very interesting. We will put all the answers on our website, on the session website. Also, all the links that have been put in there, so that you can, first of all, re-see the session. You can answer the questions, and we will come back to you and show the questions if you cannot get into that page. Thank you very much, and it was a great, informative. We didn't have a lot of interactive questions, but I think everything you said was so great. So I didn't want to stop that. Thank you, and hope to see you soon in real life. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.